our team. Okay. Everybody see my screen okay?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, then let's begin. So welcome everybody. London Excel Meetup virtual for September. Today we've got two hosts or two presenters. Sorry, we've got Patterson Oakley in an informal presentation. They will explain it a little bit more to me on the story of data steps from where it was once upon a time to where it is today, and different ways that we can store and access and manipulate that data. A few words from me, usual stuff for regulars before we begin. First of all, upcoming events. Not got too much to say today, but we do have quite a few events booked in. We've got the next 2 months done with more coming. And as many of you know, we're now kind of doubling up per month again, but we're doing one virtual, one in person. So next one, continuing this month, will be the in-person event on the 23rd. So these in-person ones are in London, at the risk of stating the obvious. And Claire Squibb will be the presenter there. Those events are not recorded and they won't be streamed. They are only in person, just so you guys know. So everyone is welcome, but they will be just in person. And then we'll continue that theme every month, assuming it goes well. So the next online one will be 13th of October with Mike Thomas, who's here today, discussing cube functions in Excel. Then we're back in person in London, where Chris Webb will be there, who many of you probably know. And he'll be talking about accessing Power BI data through Excel. So you have an existing data set in Power BI. How can we access and use that data set using cube functions, a bit like Mike's going to talk about online, but also using the organization data types and putting data into pivot tables, but using data that was kind of created and stored in Power BI. And then in November, haven't got the in-person one going there yet, but we have the online session, which is Victor. That was organized quite a while ago, actually, but just went public yesterday, I think, or the day before that. Getting hyper with hyperlinks, which sounds a bit intense, doesn't it? Should be good. All about hyperlinks. And I think next slide is my usual notes to be. So that information is all available on the Meetup page, meetup.com, London Excel Meetup, RSVP there. And you'll get information about this, in your mailbox as well. Usual things from this point of view, we are live at the moment, being streamed on YouTube. And as it streams, it also records. So give it about 30 minutes when this finishes, and YouTube would have done whatever the thing is that they have to do, and the recording will be available. So we can share links to that, but links to that is also in the description of this event. If you went there, you'd see the YouTube link, and that is the same link for the replay. We'll also share these details via email. So as long as you've RSVP'd to this, you will get that email. If you don't RSVP, you don't get the follow-up email, because we only send it to that. We don't want to bother the 2,000 plus who are in this meetup group when only 100 turn up. So we only send it to those who RSVP, and they'll have access to the files, which Oakley and Brandon have kindly shared, and also the replay link and the upcoming events, just a reminder of those, so you can get them in your calendar, etc. And that, I believe, is it from me. Just a short talk about events and stuff. So if I get rid of my PowerPoint and stop my share, I don't know who's up first out of you two. Is it yourself, Oakley?
Brandon.
Brandon.
He's going to say me, I'm going to say him.
You're in.
All right, we ready?
We are. I am.
Me too.
Good. All right, let me just get to share.
Keep the laughing down. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, my name is Brandon Patterson. I'm sure some of y'all have seen me in prior presentations, either in the audience or, just making wisecracks for fun, but always with good intention. And I'll be here today with Oakley Turvey, which I know a lot of y'all have seen his presentations. And we'll be talking about data steps, development of data storage from Spreadsheet to Dataverse. So, like all good stories, there must be a beginning. And in the case of data, it's pseudocode, the kingpin of it all. Over a second. So, of course, there's the good wild west of the 80s and 90s where our story begins with two titans of the industry. And before they could make their GUIs, APIs, and OSs and everything else they need, they first needed an idea. But even before that, I'd just like to make a side note about how amazing it is where back in the 50s and 60s, they had computers built in massive houses now. And now your simple watch holds more power than pretty much any of those ever could have. So Moore's law is amazing. So pseudocode, really, what is it? Well, according to the Oxford Dictionary, it's a notation resembling a simplified programming language used in program design. It's also instructions written in symbolic code, which must be translated into a program language before they can be executed, according to the Collins English Dictionary. So, you know, several definitions for it. But what is it at its core? It's really just a roadmap built off of blueprints, which uses human speak to go to binary-based language for program use. So we've all used it before, and you know, it's pretty much a foundation. And you know, the easiest way to get from a point A to point B in map making is using Euclidean distance. That's not really the case in coding, though. Pseudocode is more of like the GPS system we use, while GIS, Geographic Information Systems, which ties together with GPS, Global Positioning Systems, all work together to make a database which creates a three-dimensional model of the Earth using coordinates. So how does that apply to our story? Well, it's just components. Such things where they can create the design elements for all the different OSs and such they need happen in the garages of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. But they're not really the only two titans out there in Silicon Valley. So if you look at the left, you see the Microsoft OS evolution over the years. On the right, it's Apple, and in the middle, it's the free market economy. I think the picture speaks for itself, where Microsoft was a leader before Apple, and then they came along and started taking over more of the market share. So I know pseudocode is not exactly the most thought over part of the database, but it's also the foundation. So to build a house, you have to have a cornerstone, right? That's pretty much what pseudocode is. It's our map, our road atlas, and the glue that holds the system together all in one. So what's a good couple of tips we learned from this? You also always should use pseudocode to design any project before coding's done. Make sure you comment out everything, and always get a friend like Oakley to read over it. He's the outsider perspective for us. Now, how about we talk a bit more about the spreadsheet? Oakley?
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen now. Hopefully you guys can all see my screen. And what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at actually how we store data. So initially, we stored data on pieces of paper. In fact, if we go back far enough, it was pieces of stone, and we scratched stuff on the stones. Not me personally, but I'm sure Alan probably did that in his time. We did get to a stage then, however, when computers came along. So back in the early 80s, we started really seeing the wide-scale adoption of computers on a sort of a wide scale. And people were looking at ways of using computers to replicate what they were doing on pieces of paper. And one of the things that came out of this was a spreadsheet program. And spreadsheets were initially used by accountants or anybody for recording stuff. And the computer programs tried to replicate what they saw on the pieces of paper. And that's exactly where Excel comes into it. As the data gets bigger, Microsoft makes Excel get bigger. Excel wasn't the first player on the scene. There were lots of others in before there. Two particularly of note were Lotus 123 and VisiCalc. And Lotus 123 was in fact more popular than Excel when it first came out. And Excel was definitely playing catch up. But now Lotus has disappeared. VisiCalc has disappeared. Why did they disappear? Why did Excel succeed? Was it perhaps just the packaging? Because when you bought Excel, you bought into Office as a suite of programs and you got everything. So if you had actually just gone in and bought Office for the word processing for Word, well, you certainly wouldn't go and then buy Lotus 123 as your spreadsheet program because you'd already have Excel. And tying these together was a brilliant marketing trick. Let's have a look at why spreadsheets and why Excel. So first of all, people like spreadsheets because they can see their data on the spreadsheet. They can see their data in front of them. Now, anybody who works with data nowadays will actually hold their head in their hands and say, this is garbage. We don't want to see the data. We have far too much data to want to see it at any one time. What we actually want to see is we want to see the aggregation. We want to see the summary of that data. And ideally, we'd like to see it as pretty pictures because that makes sense to more people. It's also incredibly dangerous because people draw the wrong conclusions from it, but that's where it evolved to. But in the early days with the spreadsheet, it was purely trying to replicate what you had on a piece of paper. And that's what we're going to have a look at first of all. So how many cells do we have on a single spreadsheet? Well, it might stagger you to realize that we have 16 and something thousand columns, and we have just over 1 million rows. And if you multiply them together, it's 17 billion cells on a spreadsheet. And I think you'll agree that's more than you're going to use, but it's not. Because what we need to do when we're talking about collating data will very easily get bigger than 1 million rows, particularly when we're talking about machine generated data. So as soon as we get more than 1 million rows, we can't put it on a spreadsheet because the spreadsheet itself is not physically big enough. So what do people do? Well, let's have a look at what people do. I've got an example spreadsheet here, and this doesn't contain 1 million rows, but it does contain a typical example of what you might come across. And again, anybody who works with data, particularly if you go in as a consultant to other companies, you'll be really familiar with this, and you'll have torn all your hair out. You'll end up looking like Alan if you come across this kind of thing. And you say to yourself, why do people do this? And the reason they do it is because that's what they know. So here we have data which represents facts. These are things that happened. These are records of events. And these are just some made up sales. So we say that on that date, at that time, this individual, the vendor, the salesperson, whatever you want to call them, they sold this product for that much money. And just because of the way that the user has arranged this, trying to be clever, what they've done is they've actually put each month's worth of data on a separate sheet. I'm sure people have seen this before. Now, this is great because you can see the stuff on the screen, so you can see all of your data, and that's why it's really popular. But why is it bad? Well, the first thing is the stuff at the top here of every single sheet, which is not data. This might be a calculation done on the data. It might be a title. It might be a heading. It might be something else, but it's not data. So what's it doing there? Well, again, it's been put there by the person who created the spreadsheet because they think they're being helpful. From a data perspective, they're not. Now, what we might want to do is we might want to do some analysis of this data. Now, we have too much data to see on the screen at one time. If I go down, you'll see that I've created 5,000 rows of data for each of these months. So that's a significant amount to try and see on the screen. And I'm not going to scroll down to show you how long it would take to get to the bottom. Let's imagine we wanted to do some analysis and say, okay, Lyle, what was his total sales in January? Could I do that? Yes, I could. I could do that by doing a filter on here and having Lyle down there, and then having a total row at the bottom showing me the total of all of Lyle's sales. But what if I wanted to see it for February? Well, then I'd have to do the same on this sheet. What about if I wanted to see it across all of these months together at the same time on the same screen? Well, then it starts to get more complicated. I have to start doing references and linking across sheets and create a report page. So this Excel old school way of doing things becomes very limited.
Yeah, didn't you describe it as stitching it together at one point?
It's very much stitching it together. And quite often people would use VBA to actually do this. rather than complex formulas, because they found that if they put complex formulas in there, end users would just break them and type over them. So
What kind of formulas? Like
what people tend to do now is they tended to use VBA and then have a button that you click on to create the report page. Power BI, well, not so much Power BI, but the thing that created Power BI, that drove Power BI in the first place, which was the Power Query, actually came into Excel in 2009. I'm not sure many people realize that, but actually one of the most significant advances in Excel is one of the best kept secrets. People didn't know about it really until probably 2016, when it started to get wide-scale adoption. But by then it was already superseded because Power BI itself had been launched by 2016. So let's have a look at how we would have done this the old school way using Power BI. Just a very basic, not Power BI, sorry, Power Query. So if I open up another spreadsheet, this spreadsheet here only contains a single sheet, which is the sheet you can see. So where is the data? Well, the data has actually been stored in the background, because the beauty of Power Query that Microsoft built in 2009, the beauty of that was it actually did a query on all of those other sheets in the other workbooks, stitched them together, cleaned, normalized the data, and then loaded it into a database in the background of Excel. Now, for many years, people have been trying to use Excel as a database unsuccessfully for storing data. Now, at last, they could genuinely do it in Excel. So let's have a look at how that query would work. So if I just pop out, open my queries and connections, we'll see the query coming up on the right-hand side here. And I can go into the query and show you what it does. So simply by double-clicking on there, that will open up my query editor. And the query editor is a sequential language. So it goes through a series of steps, one after the other. And the first thing it does is it says, where is the file that I want to look at? It then basically,
as a point of clarification, Oakley, Christian had an interesting comment on the chat about PQ actually being known as Data Explorer.
Say again, sorry?
He said it was actually known as Data Explorer before Power Pivot.
It was. I'm just using the term now that everybody's familiar with rather than changing the name all the time, unlike Microsoft, the Power Pivot with their data modeling and everything else that they want to call it. So the first step says, where is the data? It's the source, and it goes to an Excel file. And you'll notice here that in that Excel file, I have all the different sheets on there. I've then filtered the rows down to just get the ones which are tables. And I've then basically just removed the other columns, joined them together, and changed the data types. That's an incredibly important step that some people forget. Now, this ends up with a large set of data. And if I change my profiling to see the entire data set and then come up here and hover over my quality indicator, we'll see now that this is just under 60,000 rows of data here. This is too much for anybody to see on the screen at any one time. I think you'll all agree. However, if I close and load this, now when I load it, I'm loading it into this green button here, which is the data model. And this is the one that I'm saying Microsoft used to call Power Pivot. And in fact, if I hover over the data model button, you'll see it still says go to the Power Pivot window for some weird reason. That's where the data is stored now. Now the data, because it's stored in memory, like any good database, it doesn't have to be displayed on the screen, and therefore it works much faster. Any processing we do on it is all done now in memory and much, much, much faster. It's very easy now to create a pivot table from this data. And in that pivot table, we can use any of the fields from that data. And I'm only actually using two of the fields here, the date, month, and the cost. And this will give me my total value for each of these months. And if I wanted to filter by one of the individuals, I just simply click on them on this slicer. I now see the data filtered for that individual across each month. I can also do that not just for individuals. I can do that for products. So I might say, let's see our red grapes. Let's see how many of red grapes we sold across each month. And there we have it. What we can also see is, did we have any months where we didn't sell a particular product? And simply by scrolling up and down here, I can see that all of these slices are still lit up. Therefore, I sold that product every single month. Okay, we can also make little charts at the bottom, and much easier for people to see, much easier for people to understand the analysis, rather than trying to look down a table of 60,000 rows of data. Okay, let me just pop back to the presentation. Why did Excel introduce this database in the background? Well, the simple reason is that Spreadsheet was not big enough to display all the data. And the second is it was incredibly slow. If we try and put 1 million rows in an Excel spreadsheet, it'll simply stop working. Not because it can't cope with it, but because the memory capacity won't be able to handle it. So what we're doing is we've actually built a proper database in the background of Excel. Okay, why did people like Excel? Well, because you can see all your data, and I'm saying Excel spreadsheets without Power Query. Why do people like Power Query? Because it's much easier to work with bigger sets of data. Okay, Brandon, back to you.
Great. Real nice, Oakley. Let me get back to the right slide.
Cool.
I don't know why I put me there, but okay. So, good little Excel roundup there. How about a real database now? So, the rise of databases follows pretty much everything we just talked about to the age of proper SQL relational predictive capability machines, pretty much. You know, Microsoft began its great climb to the top by releasing Access to the world as its flagship. But before we actually get to that, most of the things are actually hosted on-premise, and you still have quite a few companies that use on-premise versus cloud nowadays, but that's really just means it's hosted in-house, quite literally from the advanced network professionals. But what exactly is a database? I mean, Oakley did a pretty good job, but the standard definition is an organized collection of structured information controlled by a database management system. And together they work to pretty much make all the apps you enjoy happen. Also, you know, there's a lot of common types of databases in operation today, typically modeled in rows and columns, but the most important thing about a database is that it allows the data to be managed, accessed, modified, and updated easily. And it also must tie into structured query language. All right, Oakley, back to you. Teeing you up for what's a good database.
Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, so you talk about a proper database, a professional database, but what makes a good database? Well, firstly, it needs to be able to store data. It needs to be able to store lots of data, and it needs to be able to store lots of data efficiently. But it's not just all about storage. It's also about allowing people to access that data, but also controlling who has access and who doesn't. So it's the fine balance between those different things, how to store a huge amount of data, how to give people access and restrict access to that data, and also to perform some kind of summary of the data so that us stupid humans can actually understand it in a single visual gulp, rather than having to sit there scanning down through thousands and thousands of rows of data, or millions, or even nowadays billions of rows of data. On the right-hand side, I've just put some typical databases. I've got Access at the top. This is Microsoft's entry-level database. I like to refer to it as quite an amateur database. And I've heard people describe it as a wonderful forms tool for data entry. And it's a good front end for professional databases. So what other databases do we have? Well, we have SQL, we have Oracle, SAP, and so on. So these are the mainstream corporate databases that people are familiar with. But do we actually need them? I talked about Excel having a database in the background. For most of us, that database is actually good enough. Brandon said, but we need professional databases, real databases, which are relational. That actually the database in the back of Excel is relational. So what I can do here is I can bring up an example. So we can bring up another Excel file, which will show this relational database. Now, what I've done here.
Talking about the structure, by the way, like the stronger relational ones versus what you're talking about, which is the basic one.
It is a basic relational database. And then we'll look at how we compare this with Power BI in a moment, which is a different kind of database and a different way of actually working with it. So here we have a similar set of data. In fact, it's almost exactly the same set of data. But the difference here is now the vendor has not been identified by their name. They've been identified by a code number. And the same with the product. And the reason for this is because if I have lots and lots of data, like here, remember, I've got 60,000 rows of data, I can save a lot of memory by simply storing a small numeric value instead of a large text string 60,000 times. And the same here, a small numeric value rather than a large text string. And if you remember, some of the product descriptions were quite big. And then what we do is we create a table which becomes known as a lookup or dimension table. And this contains more information about each of those products or more information about each of those cashiers. So we now somehow need to run our query editor to get all of this data into that background database, and then to actually create the links to enable us to work with it as a single coherent set of data. Anyone familiar with Excel, which you all probably are, will probably say, why not just use a VLOOKUP? 60,000 rows, that's why not. Your VLOOKUP will completely fall over if you start using VLOOKUPs. Any more than realistically a few hundred in a spreadsheet will slow it down too much for it to be effective. We'll just turn off the calculations, have them as manually calculated. Yeah, but that's a workaround. That's not solving the problem. That's actually just putting a sticky plaster over it. This way solves the problem by having a proper relational database. So let's see what we actually do with this. So this is the data that we're going to query. And this is the result of the query. So if I now bring up again my queries and connections, you'll notice that we have 3 individual queries here now. But the queries are not the magic. The queries are just simply getting the data and bringing it in. But then what we can do is we can actually load it into this data model, which is the actual database in the background of Excel. So let's go into the data model and have a look. And at first view, you look at it and say, well, that's not very exciting. All I'm seeing is like what I'd see on a spreadsheet. And you'd be right. This is not the exciting view. The diagram view here, that shows us the relations between the tables. Now, this is very easy to understand when it's been explained to you. The link that's created here is from product ID to product ID. So in my data, remember, this is my facts. This is the 60,000 rows. I have many instances of a product. That's good. That's what we'd like. We'd like to have sold many of each product. But over here on the lookup table, we only have 1 instance of each product ID. So therefore, these are unique values. So the cardinality is a many-to-one or one-to-many. We'll also notice that in the middle here, there's an arrow which shows the direction of the filter. So if I were to use my food category as a filter criteria, I would be filtering the fact data by the product category or food category. We have a similar thing on the left-hand side, slightly different. I'm constantly told by people that, what you need here is you need the columns to be called the same thing. I think this will demonstrate they don't have to be called the same thing at all. They just have to have matching data within them.
Oakley, is that a best practice, though? I've always wondered that.
It's a good practice. It's a good idea to have, but it's not essential. It's particularly useful when you're doing Power BI, because Power BI will create these relationships automatically for you. So it is useful to help it out as much as possible, but you don't need to have them exactly the same name. Yes, it is best practice. But if you've not created the source, you might not have direct control over that. Same again here, we have unique values. We have one of each cashier ID in our HR database of cashiers, but each cashier over here has sold more than one item. Yes, we'd hope so, within the year. Now, this is the database. This is actually where the data is stored. We can't see the data. All we can ever see is a representation or a summary of that data. But if I go back into Excel, we can now use the magic pivot table. And this is what got the name Power Pivot. And I refer to it as pivot tables on steroids, because we're now creating a pivot table or pivot chart, not just from one table of data, but from multiple tables at the same time. So I'm using different fields from multiple tables to create my visualization. And this all feeds into the visual over here. And again, it lets me apply some slicer filters to actually see the data much, much easier. And I think you'll agree, it's a much nicer and cleaner way to see it than to try and scroll down lots and lots of data in a spreadsheet, which just makes your eyes go funny. Okay. Back to you, Brandon.
All right, all right. Well, I hope y'all are ready for some rain. It's about to get cloudy.
I'll tell you what, I've forgotten something. I forgot to show you Power BI. Let me jump back in and show you Power BI. Because although we can do that in Excel, in about 2015, Microsoft revealed that they've been working in the background on a replacement or an enlargement of the Power Query tools that were behind Excel. Now, the tools in Excel are fantastic and I still use them every day. However, Power BI does a different thing. So Power BI is really a data visualization tool. People talk about it as business intelligence. No, that's something it does, but that's not really what it's designed for. It's designed to visualize the data. And part of visualizing is sharing with other people. And we have problems doing that with Excel, because if we want to share with Excel, how do we do it? Well, we give people our Excel file, and they then maybe make changes in the file. And we have two versions of the truth, because their changes are not reflected in my file. So what about if we share the file, I hear you say? So we'll upload it to OneDrive or SharePoint, and we'll share the file, and we have multiple people working on it at the same time. Absolutely, that's fine. But there are still problems with it. And the biggest problem is if we share the file with somebody who we want to see the summary of the data, we're actually giving them all of the data, or we're giving them access to all of the data, which is often not a good idea. So Power BI does that in a different way. Power BI, when you have your PBIX file stored on your machine, when you actually upload it or publish it, it breaks that into two parts. And the two parts are a data set and a report. And the report is what you share with people. And the data set then feeds the report different bits of data according to who they are if you've set up row-level security. So they can never get hold of the data that they're not entitled to view because they never get sent that data in the first place, unlike if you're sharing an Excel spreadsheet. Oh, but what about if we put permissions and passwords and everything like that on it? Well, don't bother because they don't work. I'm talking about Excel. So here in Power BI, we have a similar thing. So we can go in and transform data and we see almost exactly the same Power Query as we saw before in Excel. So the Power Query I've got here is actually exactly the same as it was in Excel. The same series of steps. It's got the data from the same source. It has the three queries separately. The difference is when I close and apply, Power BI will automatically stitch them together into the relational database. In Excel, it would have just put the different tables in there and I would have had to create my own relationships. Again, we notice that here, product ID to product ID, vendor ID to cashier ID, and even though they're differently named, Power BI will have joined them together automatically. This part here, which is the model view and the data view, They basically make up the data model, and they also allow us to add in extra calculations, which we call measures, over here. And we should always put the calculations in after we've got the data in. We shouldn't bring in the calculations as part of the data. Yeah.
Hey, Oakley.
Go ahead.
This is a fun little curveball. I was going to ask you, if you have two that are sharing a cardinality like that, but they have different names, if you get those mixed up, do they have tools where you could debug that somehow?
What do you mean?
Like where you're just on the data model. Can you go back for a sec? Say like where the, wow, that is tiny. The vendor ID matches the cashier ID, and it's the same one. But say like further on down the line, you make a similar field. Can those somehow get crossed up?
Yeah, it does happen very often. And what I normally say to people when we're working on this is, as soon as you've made a change in your query and you come back into the main screen of Power BI, always come into the model view and check. Because a typical example is if you have a calendar table or a date table, and you might have two instances of a date in your modeling. So you might, for example, have purchase date and sales date. You might have order date and shipping date. So which one does it want to join to? Sometimes it will join to both of them and put in an inactive relationship. So this is why I say come in here immediately and check it. Yes, it's easy to fix. So you can double click on there and you can edit the actual settings of the relationship. I find it easier just to delete it and recreate it myself, because that takes about 2 seconds. Yeah.
You also have that manage relationships thing up there you could look at too, but I notice it doesn't really.
Yeah, it comes up with the same thing. Yeah, like I say, I tend to just right click on it and delete.
That's like an overarching tool that you can use to debug this stuff if it does go wonky on you.
Not directly, no, but you do have external tools you can use like DAX Studio.
Okay.
And you can actually, because this is running a database in the background, so it's running a full-blown SQL database in the background. What you can actually do is you can use Power BI itself to analyze the Power BI that's running, if that makes any sense. So because it's an SQL database, you've got all of the SQL analysis tools available to you, and you can analyze the Power BI, what's going on behind it. So you can create a list of all your measures, for example. But like I said, the real beauty of Power BI is in the visualizations. And here I've created various different, basically, sheets down the bottom, and only one of them is visible, which is the first one. And what I'm doing is I've got region details here, and that's basically a drill through sheet. So anything that has a region, I can go to the region, I can right click, and this will allow me to drill through to that region details page to see more information about what's on that page. And that will be filtered by the specific region. So here green is west, so that will have been filtered by west. Now, the other thing we've got here is a tooltip, which is a visual or report page tooltip, which pops up. And what this is doing is it's being driven by this page here, this TT sales page, which basically just has a small tooltip icon, then with a few little formatting settings over here, and a couple of formatting settings on this visual. We make it so that that will pop up wherever we've hovered over, and we see the tooltip there. Now, because I've hidden all of these pages, how do the users actually navigate to those pages? Well, again, I'm doing this to control how people go through the story. So if you were writing a book, you want people to start at page 1 and then go to page 2 and then to page 3. You don't want them just to open the book in the middle and start reading and then go back to the beginning and read another page and then jump to the end and read a page. So by hiding all of these pages, everybody who views this report ends up on the first page. And then we allow them to navigate to certain pages by putting hyperlinks on there to allow them to navigate through to the specific pages. And from that page they've landed on, we allow them to navigate back to our home page. Now, this at the moment, this is the desktop version, and this is not published. This is not what you share with people. What you actually share with people is the online version. So in order to get it online, you just hit the publish button, and it will take your login here, and it will associate that with your logged in published account. And this is what we see in the online version. Now, the difference here is we're not seeing any of those tabs because they're for the editing view only. Most often, the viewers might even see it in full screen rather than seeing anything else on their screen. And we can set up mobile phone layouts or tablet layouts as well. And we can even embed this in an existing web page. Everything here now just works. We don't have to do control click. We just click on it, click to go back, click on time of day, click to go back. We can set bookmarks in here. We can control the bookmarks with the links on buttons. Really, really useful, very, very effective way of sharing data with people. Much, much better than just an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, now I genuinely am going to go back to you, Brandon.
All right. Well, quite a lot of versatility in that visualization. Well, time to get to the future. So, of course, the final evolution of data. We started at pseudocode as the foundation, got into the spreadsheet area, decided that wasn't enough, where we needed to have it allocated in memory and not active memory in an actual database. And that's still an on-premise, of course. And now we're up to the cloud. We have upgraded people. Offsite data storage. I mean, it's part and parcel for just about any cloud service worth their salt. You got the, like the most basic ones, the biggest contenders from Azure, Amazon, OneDrive, Google Drive, yada, yada, yada. They're just rolling them off the assembly line, it seems. The great thing about these is that a lot of them do geo-redundant services where they have mirror servers scattered throughout the globe too. So pretty much you got backups on backups and, it's looking like a real nice world. So, Oakley, what are you thinking about this? I'm going to go with on-premise because personally I like the idea that you can just upgrade things, pretty much everything.
Oh, in that case, I'll talk about cloud. And anybody else in the audience, if you want to join in, feel free to unmute yourselves and make any comments as we're going through, whichever you prefer. Do you prefer cloud or on-premise databases? Or even not necessarily databases, just different means of storing data. And what do you think would be the advantages or disadvantages of either?
Well, I'll start. On-premise has the most control over physical and security.
Well, does it really? I mean, cloud is fantastic for access. So basically, it allows you to get at your data from anywhere. You don't have to have a connection to your on-premise device. And if you try and make your on-premise server accessible from outside, you're basically putting a big loophole in it that other people can exploit.
Yeah, but they can also hack it through the cloud. Anything can be hacked if you throw enough time and money at it, after all. Including
on-premise. So you can hack on-premise as well. And actually on-premise, you can only afford a certain level of security and expertise. Whereas cloud, maybe your cloud's being managed by Google or Microsoft, and they have a lot more money and expertise than me or you to be able to apply security.
Yeah, but then you run into the problem of scalability where you don't get as much attention on yours as you could since they have so many clients. And even if you do manage to bring over stuff from other problems to help you solve your problem.
I'm glad you mentioned scalability, because scalability is one of the huge advantages of cloud, because you can just buy what you need. You don't have to spend all this money on physical infrastructure that maybe 6 months down the line, you're going to want to downsize, and it's much more difficult to downsize and get your money back. Whereas if you're on cloud, you've got almost infinite scalability, and you can buy for services and also for storage space just as and when you need it. And it's really easy and quick to scale up or down.
Okay, but how do you explain that to older people who just want something that works and they're used to on-premise?
Well, sometimes you just have to wait for them to die.
Harsh, man.
I'm kidding you here. Actually, I don't find that to be an issue with most of the people I come across. I don't find it to be an age issue. I find it to be a state of mind issue. Some people don't want to change. Some people like the way they've done stuff. They don't know why. It's just change that they're afraid of. And it really has nothing to do with their age. You've heard of the phrase silver surfer, and actually the sort of granny generation, they've definitely got much more awareness of computers than some middle-aged people I come across.
Heck, I was just having to show my granddad how to use his phone the other day, so I don't know about that. I suppose they exist somewhere.
Jason just popped a question in the chat about the carbon footprint, and to be honest, I don't know the answer to that one. But what I can say is that data centers where a lot of the cloud storage is managed, most of the time the data centers are sensibly located. And what I mean by that is your business will run where your business runs. So if your business is in central London and your on-premise data storage is in central London, that's where you're using the energy. If you're using a cloud data center, that data center might well be in Iceland or Norway, and it's using geothermal energy because it's cheaper, not necessarily because it's more environmentally friendly and got a lower footprint, but the reason the data center is there is because it's cheaper, but it does also have a more environmentally friendly footprint. The downside of it is the communication between the data center and between you, that's using energy that wouldn't otherwise be used.
Not to mention, a lot of the Silicon Titans are pretty much creating green servers. I know Amazon alone is trying to be carbon neutral by 2050, last I heard.
I think, to be honest, a lot of the carbon neutral calculations, when you actually dig into them, you see a lot of stuff that you wouldn't expect.
Well, I mean, how a lot of that works, at least in the States, I don't know about abroad. They do a lot of the build-based offset carbon. So yeah, that's about what I know about that. I don't think the other thing I like about on-premise, though, it's cheaper on the internet.
On-premise is cheaper on the internet, sure, but unless your people are working from home. If your staff are working from home, that's not cheaper on the internet, because now you have to have a really, really big pipeline to actually let people from home work on your on-premise server. And you're basically setting up a local cloud just for them to VPN in. And I was working with somebody, in fact, yesterday on a training course, and she's analyzing a really big data set. I'm talking hundreds of millions of rows of data here. And she's trying to do it from home through her home Wi-Fi, through a VPN, and it's just not working. And the solution was to go into work and plug it into the work network. And then it's going to work much faster.
Sounds like a good solution. Hey, Dick actually said something about one of the best values for cloud is it allows easy access to your solutions from anywhere. And he uses a VM that runs Windows and Office in the cloud. So
absolutely, yeah. And that's a great example of not just data storage, but actually data services and internet computer services that you can purchase. So you can purchase a VM for a limited amount of time that you'd never, ever be able to afford to buy yourself. Yeah. And, another side of that is if you think of the analogy of if you're moving house, you don't go out and buy a van just because you're moving house. You go and rent a van, and you rent it for the time that you need it. So think of your cloud service as something similar. You rent it when you need it, and then when you finish with it, you give it back.
So what you're basically
don't have it cluttering up the driveway.
Even if the on-premise might be cheaper in the long run, no, the short run, the long run would be more expensive, where cloud is just kind of running out of services.
I come across people every day who say, oh, I'd never use cloud. I don't trust it. And then they give me their email address, and it's a Hotmail email address. I try and explain to them that they have been using the cloud for 20 years. They just haven't known what it was called. So, there are web-based email services. There are web-based Google Drive, OneDrive, all these things. They are cloud. And if you look at the icon on the bottom of your computer, they've even got a cloud as the icon. So you're kidding yourself if you think you're not using the cloud all the time, every day, because most of us are.
Well, that's kind of why it's really more of a spectrum. You got your true on-premise, then some hybrid, even all the way up to cloud. It's almost like a pick your own poison sort of thing for gear setup.
I think there's definitely, the debate aside, I think there's definitely benefits of on-premise data storage for high-end security applications.
Like national
national security. Whether the people who are responsible for managing them are the best people for managing them and the best positioned to manage them compared with things like Microsoft and Google, and whether a cloud-based encrypted service might not be a better solution, I'm not the person to judge. They're probably going to have to make those decisions themselves.
Pretty good debate. All right, I'm definitely feeling it's time to go over the cons. Hey, Alan, how about you start?
I've got nothing.
Come on in. The water's fine.
So let's see what everybody else thinks. I've just stuck a poll up. If people just talk about where they currently store their data, so just answer the question, say where you currently store your data and where you see your data storage going in the future. And then when everybody's answered, or when most people have answered, I'll just share that with everybody else.
Would anyone else like to join in the chat to talk about some more? Pros or cons?
I'm getting a good impression from the poll as to where people are going.
I can't be the only one who likes on-premise. I got 12 others.
I think you are, actually. Well, it's you and one other at the moment.
It looks like someone might be using a hybrid.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's actually end the poll and we'll share that with people. Yeah, Dick, of course you can talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Oakley. Yeah, my take on, there's an interesting thing that I do. I have Dropbox, and every single file that I use, Excel file, Access file, Word file, everything is in a Dropbox folder, which automatically gets synced to the cloud. So I have a local copy and a cloud copy. If I change the contents of a file in my local machine and hit enter, it automatically replicates that change to the cloud. Plus, I can give other people access to a cloud folder, and they can then share the file with me, right? And it's dirt simple. It costs very little, and frankly, it's better technology than OneDrive and SharePoint, as far as I'm concerned, because it just
the idea of that is actually the same as what they all do. So Google Drive will do the same. So OneDrive will do the same.
Right, but OneDrive is not as strong as Dropbox, because OneDrive tries to be a whole bunch of things that it doesn't need to be.
OneDrive is actually SharePoint. So people call it OneDrive, but if you look at the path for it, it's actually SharePoint.
It's really complex. And so Dropbox is dedicated to one thing and one thing only, and they do it well. Yeah. And if you have a local copy of synchronized OneDrive, we've run into, in our work on Excel Publish, all kinds of gotchas with that, right? Yep. Never with Dropbox. So there you go. Sorry, guys.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. And even with a Power Query, if I point a Power Query to a OneDrive file, if the computer is connected to the internet when you refresh the query, then it will work fine because it's pointing to the online OneDrive file. If the computer is not connected, well, of course, you could just directly connect to your local copy, but that's not where the Power Query is pointing to. So you have to actually be careful where you set up your link to in the first place. Do you set it up to the local copy on your machine, or do you set it up to the OneDrive copy? And as you say, with the Dropbox, you don't have so much of an issue.
I'd actually like to add something to
that. Jason, let me just answer Jason's question here. First of all, he's asking about SQL. Power BI really does have an SQL database running in the background. And if you open up your, if you have your DAX tools, you can actually see the instance number of that SQL database at the bottom of the screen. And you can use the SQL tools if you want to do that high-end analysis of your Power BI, your data model. Your question was, do you need to know SQL in order to use it? No, you absolutely don't. But Power BI does really depend on two other languages that you don't need to learn, but you'll benefit hugely from knowing them. The first is M code, and the M code is what drives Power Query. So mashup code is what drives the query, and this is a sequential language which has a series of steps, one after the other, each step produces a table as a result, normally a table as a result, and then you do the next step based on the result of the previous table or the previous step. So definitely sequential. The lowest step, or the bottom step, gives you your end result for that query. DAX is quite different. DAX is an on-demand language, so it's not done sequentially, and DAX is only calculated when it's required for the page that you are viewing. So if you're viewing a page that doesn't use 5 of your 20 measures, it doesn't ever calculate them when it loads that page. So those are the two different languages that you definitely benefit from learning, is the M code and the DAX, but absolutely you don't have to know them. And you don't need to know any SQL. M code is definitely intuitive, and it's also very good because most of the things that you want to do are actually on the ribbons. So you can actually just click buttons on the ribbons, and then you can, if you've got your formula bar turned on, then you learn the language by immersion. So let me just share my screen and I'll demonstrate what I'm talking about. So I'm sharing my screen here again. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into my query editor. And you'll see a couple of things on here that you may not have coming up on your own query editor. The first is the formula bar. This is what I'm saying. The formula bar, in order to do all of these steps, I didn't write any code. All I did was click boxes and different buttons on the ribbon. So I got to my source to filter the rows to get to that step there. All I did was I went up here and I said, okay, apply a filter and just show me the ones which are tables. So I just used click boxes and the machine generated the code. So by simply clicking on these individual steps, it's very easy for me to read the code. And like I say, you'll learn the language by immersion. It's kind of like going to Germany on holiday. By the end of the first couple of days, you know how to order a beer, if not quicker. Alan's looking at me like, end of 2 days to learn how to order a beer?
Hey, Alan, I actually had a question for you since he's talking about M code. Do you know if Microsoft has any learning modules dedicated to that?
What, on their Microsoft Learn modules?
No, just learning like M
Learning
code and
parts.
DAX, kind of like that Power BI thing you had a while back.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, they don't have much, nowhere near as much as DAX. They don't seem to talk about.
I think they feel the same as everybody else does, that it's really intuitive and actually people pick it up without having to learn it separately. But there are some really good resources like M for Data Monkey and the new version of M for Data Monkey that's come out. So Ken Poole's book, Pools and Escobar. Back to what I was saying about actually showing these things here. When you open up your Power Query, that's not always showing by default, the formula bar. So if yours is not showing, go to the View ribbon and check the box for formula bar. The thing immediately below there, which is the column quality indicator, this is really, really useful. Turn on your column quality. It doesn't take much space on your screen. It's invaluable. Now, the column quality is not looking at the entire data set when you first turn it on. It's only looking at the top 1,000 rows. And the reason for that is it takes a while to look down the column if you've got 100 million rows. So you just want it to look and give you a sample data view. But if you're only working on a few thousand rows, just come down to the bottom and in your status bar, just make it view the profiling based on the entire data set. So if I have it based on the entire data set, if I had 60,000 rows, this would now take a few seconds longer to process, but I would then, when I hover over there, I'd see the quality indicator for all 60,000 rows instead of just the top 1,000. Yeah, so that's absolutely worth knowing how they work. You do have others as well, like you can say the column profile. And if you turn that on, when you choose a column, you'll actually see the profile for the data within that column. Yeah. That's useful to turn on and off. I don't normally work with that turned on, but I have these other two turned on absolutely all the time. Okay. Jason, I hope that was useful.
Shall we keep going?
Yeah, go ahead.
Links in the chat.
Hi, Dan. Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Go ahead. Did you have a question?
Okay.
Oh, wait, was there another question?
No, it's just Jason say thanks.
Oh, okay. Well, all right then. So after our little debate, here's a little synopsis of all the pros and cons that me and Oakley could figure out together. So one more step. Customize everything, baby. That's the grand finale. But do we really know what it looks like? No, not really. I mean, we can take guesses, projections, all sorts of stuff, but really it's just forecasting at the end of the day. Such a massive evolution in the tech landscape, and it's just going to continue going the stronger our computers get, even possibly all the way up to quantum computing. So in terms of database, though, the fully customized database will be pretty much any form between on-premise, hybrid to cloud. And it'll be where you can change it up to make it truly individual for 8 billion to 9 billion to how many billion people we got nowadays?
Too many.
Really, though, the reality of it is we just don't know. The ideal is full customization, of course, but who knows what that'll actually look like 20 years from now. And of course, if you're wondering what else might be going on with the Silicon Titans, well, that might just be a story for another day. Any questions, folks? I hope you've enjoyed it. Any more questions?
Just look at the
Good stuff.
chat.
Have you got any questions on the YouTube there, Alan?
No, just quite quiet. The only question was somebody asking if Microsoft Exchange is cloud-based or not. That was a while back.
Depends on how you've got it installed.
Yeah, basically.
So yes and no.
Yeah, no, you're doing it on Fusion, right? So it shows you a message with a green color bar that your ticket is submitted. I don't think it came.
Oh, it's nothing to us, I don't think.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, I was really confused about there. I couldn't see the green bar.
what?
All right. There's no questions in the chat at the moment. Cool. Session was great, though, guys. I know you're.
What I would ask though is if anybody does have any questions
How
or
are we
comments,
moving
doesn't have to be
forward with-
questions. If you've got any comments, just pop them into
This is
the.
one thing.
So yeah, go on.
What are we doing in terms of preparation?
What do you mean?
I think he's back on the phone.
Right.
I was just going to say, if anybody does have any comments or questions, please post them on the site, the Meetup site. And then anybody else who's got answers to it, just go ahead and give your answer.
Cool.
I have a comment. Surprise,
Go
surprise, surprise, surprise. It has been years, almost 2 decades since I had the revelation that, you know what the best trick is? To have a virtual machine running in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And every organization should be doing that. Just move the whole organization to using virtual machines in the cloud, either with Citrix, which is a lot of money, or with Azure. Then you run all of your files. It's just like you're using it on your desktop, but in actual fact, you're running it in the cloud. And that, to me, it just, if I had a business with multiple people, especially if it was multiple offices around, even if they're 3 blocks from each other, all right, or if they're half a world away, moving to the cloud for your virtual machines running Windows, it's just a no-brainer to me. And
I agree with that.
Yeah, right.
I completely agree with that. But you have to realize that lots of businesses run in different ways. So that works ideally, provided you can guarantee an internet connectivity for everybody everywhere they're working. What about if you're a project manager and you're working on a building site? You need the software running on your laptop that you're on at the moment, because you can't guarantee connectivity.
Well, that can be arranged. I mean, it's getting to the point where those arguments don't stand anymore, because if you really do it you can resolve it. And you know, like I forget what they call it here. They used to call it a rocket stick. You could actually have a cellular modem that plugs into.
Oh, you can. My
port,
laptop
right?
actually takes a SIM card, so I can run that off my laptop.
Yeah, so that if a company really wants to use it remotely, unless they're in Timbuktu or someplace, and that's the problem. It's the old classic. You don't want to work to the lowest common denominator. And the thing is also, this is not nosebleed time. I'm not talking about something that's new. This has been around for a very long time. It's very mature technology, and it's very, very reliable.
Like I say, I do agree with you. And you're not the first person to think about this. And all we have to do is go into PC World and look how many Chromebooks they're trying to sell, and they're not selling. Because people don't want thin clients. People want a computer with their stuff on their computer. People are still, like I was saying to Brandon, people are still not wanting change.
Just saying, y'all keep forgetting about one thing, though.
What?
I mean, the fact that internet isn't always consistent. It's not possible to have that literally everywhere. I mean,
Especially
maybe at some point
quarantine.
it is, but that's not going to be anytime soon. I still have quite a few friends who live in the boonies who are relying on satellite internet. Granted, they're not doing remote work, but still.
Wow.
Like go ahead.
Yeah, I missed a lot of what's happening. I'm running crazy here, but I think of getting something in the cloud, and I'm constantly getting these notifications. Hey, you're almost out of space. Pay us the money. Well, no, I'll go buy another hard drive, a terabyte hard drive, and it's not going to send me alerts and hassle me.
Yeah.
And not to mention, when you do go on the cloud, yeah, it might be cheaper and you get more experience from like people who are doing this as a combined thing from the economy of scales. But also, what's stopping them from price gouging you? How do you know they're not doing that, I wonder?
Yeah. Yep.
There's issues.
Beware, that's all. You got.
Yeah, there's issues about data security as well, because if your cloud provider is in the USA, but your customer's data is coming from Europe, who's got jurisdiction over that data?
Yeah, well, Microsoft has data centers in the UK and in Canada and every European country. So I personally can use a Canadian data center for Microsoft, and I'm perfectly compliant if that's a concern, right? I mean, a lot of these concerns have been worked out. And yes, you could say, well, it's a pain, like what Oz was saying is legitimate in a way. It's legitimate. Well, no, in a way, in that, when it says, oh, you're used up your quota, but if you manage things properly, you should never get to that point, right? If you anticipate, and I think that that's not a great example. Nothing. Sorry, Oz. I absolutely am not pleased with disagreeing with you, but I'm not disagreeing with you loudly. But
all right, Dick Moffitt.
Yeah.
No, I'll drive up there and what's for. See, but
bring some beer if you drive up. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
RJ is making a good point as well about the cost of connection in some places. And again, anybody in the UK, we're pretty lucky. We've got relatively fast speeds. And I'm saying the UK. There's places in the UK which are not, like Wales, for example, probably the whole of Wales. But if you're in any of the big cities in the UK, it's fairly cheap for internet connection and it's fairly fast. I was saying to Alan, just this last week, I was working on my phone, doing remote training 6 hours a day, all day. And I was streaming 35 meg through my phone. That's really workable. But if I go to Australia, it's a whole different ballgame.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in the big cities, you're fine. But as soon as you go outside the cities, it's really difficult to get internet coverage.
I mean, I guess you could carry a hotspot, but that'd still just be going on satellite.
That only works if you've got a satellite or if you're near a mobile phone tower.
Jeez.
And that using satellites gets really, really expensive for data.
But if you're a corporation, you've already got a hardwired internet coming into your server center and
Absolutely.
you're providing. So, I mean, we're talking about individuals. I can see individuals, but I use a VM and it doesn't pay me, it doesn't cost me very much. I have the lowest of the low Azure VMs and it costs me like $50 a month if I use it. But if I don't use it, it can cost me nothing because I just disable it, right?
Or you just pay, you pay $10 a month to keep the facility.
Footing, and then you turn it on and expand it when you need it, and then shrink it down again. So
it's definitely the future.
Oh, definitely.
Man, so it was funny. I thank Dick for reminding me of this.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. I was on a road trip, and I went through Tonopah, Nevada, and at the first hotel I stayed in, I was constantly fighting with the internet. And then I went to a nicer hotel, and the internet was better. But then the guy at the desk is telling me, well, it depends on the clouds and the satellite and the dish. And but I had never heard of such a thing. But I learned that day.
Yeah. I think it does depend where you are.
Sounds like you're trying to take you for a little ride.
Well, if you're using satellite like Starlink, I think the clouds can have an impact on it. I do believe so. Or rain can have an impact on it. It's quality. But nobody seems to talk about it. But
definitely does. Yeah, especially if you're working through the mobile network.
Right on.
I'm pretty sure everybody in this group uses cloud in one form or another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think even if people don't realize they're using the cloud.
Wow.
I didn't really realize that email actually counted as cloud. That makes sense though. It's all hosted on a server somewhere.
But we got all the folks. We got Christian, Taya, Farazji, Claudia, Horschel. Yeah. Dick Moffat. Yeah. Christian. Oh, yeah. Claudia. Oi.
It was.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, Oz, you missed a pretty fun presentation. You just get here then?
Yeah, basically, yeah. Well, I wanted to get in, but I'm just running crazy, and then I've got a dentist appointment in about 2 hours. Stuff is just all over the place right now.
Yeah, Christian was comparing us to Anchorman earlier.
Yeah.
Now what's that comparison?
Oh, you never seen Anchorman? Will Ferrell?
I remember the fight between the different networks.
Yeah,
I remember that, but I don't know if I've seen the whole movie.
I might be exaggerating just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Good stuff, though. Everybody decided they want to go on cloud.
Wow. The cloud.
Yep.
Oh. It's on everybody's mind. Getting quiet.
Oh, we just read Mark's comment about how we're being tracked. So we're scared to say anything.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Let me close this YouTube.
If I just say Google's not listening, it said, yes, we are.
Yeah.
Hey, Google, go ahead and order me a pizza.
And so I think of a lot of people don't think about privacy. And they will store client stuff, in a cloud, in a shared folder, and they just aren't thinking.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And the best thing is if you're working with client data, store it hard copy. In other words, you store it offline, like on a memory stick or on a hard drive, and then you delete it when you no longer need it. As soon as you've answered the question, you delete it.
The best thing is that I try to insist on is that they give me a login to their Citrix or their VM network, and I actually do all my work for them using Windows inside their environment. I never even do their applications on my own machine. 99% of the time I've done that for the last 10, 15 years. And it's really perfect.
The other thing I asked them to do, the other thing I asked them to do, sometimes after a training course, they'll have a question to do with their specific data. And I ask them to anonymize it before they send it to me.
Oh, yeah.
And then the code that I've written on it will still work as long as the headings and everything like that is still the headings and the structure are still the same. And the data itself doesn't really matter because that's what they can then put back in the data when I send them the answer.
You know, I actually got a question for y'all. Two-parter, actually. So in the cloud, how does one exactly stay proactive about security versus being reactive if someone somehow finds a way to hack your data and take it? And the second part of that, is there such a thing as 3-factor authentication yet, or is it still 2-factor?
Well, the first answer is you can encrypt stuff when you stick on the cloud. So just because
I'm just saying, how do you actually plan out every single way a possible hacker could get into your system?
Well, you can't.
Even if they just take down one server and you have your data on another one, they still have a copy of it.
Yeah, but if it's encrypted, they just get a bunch of garbage. They don't know what to do with it. They can't read it. So if you put a secure folder, you can have an encrypted folder online. You can still have cloud storage that you can access from everywhere, but you need the passkey in order to get into it.
I'm just saying, and say if you have like a DDoS attack on one of the servers, and they manage to take some of your data, and then they have a way to decrypt it. I don't know. That's a lot of what ifs there, but how would you plan for a situation like that? I wonder.
You have a redundancy. In other words, you have another copy somewhere. So if they've taken one of your copies and encrypted it and denied you access to it, you switch to your other server.
Still seems like it could be a lawsuit waiting to happen, especially if you have people's personal information.
Well,
most of those attacks don't require them having access to the data inside of your database. What they're relying on is them denying you access to it. So they'll take your data, whatever's in the data, they're not interested. What they'll do is they'll then encrypt it, and they'll then blackmail you to get the unlock code.
So basically ransomware then, I
guess. So if that's your only copy of the data, you have to pay. So make sure it's not the only copy.
The other thing I do, guys, is I use VMs locally on my local machine. I have a Mac and I run Windows in a VM using on the local machine. And I have 2 or 3 VMs depending on what versions I'm using. And I just back up those VMs into an external hard drive, which are now cheap for, you can get a one for a couple of $100 with 8 terabytes or something. And you just do that and there's your protection, right? And it only takes a few minutes to back the whole thing up because these modern digital hard drives are fast, right? And that makes me sleep at night, by the way. But there's a lot of people who have stuff on their local machines and they never back them up. Never.
We do that as well sometimes with training machines. So at the end of a training course, we just simply reset the VM back to where it was at the start of the course.
Yeah.
So all of the files, all of the data, everything on that machine that the clients have used is now no longer there because we've reset the machine back to what it was previously.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's so useful.
Still, though, is there such a thing as 3-factor authentication? Like 2-factor is just pretty much like a lock and key. What would be a hypothetical third way to do it? Just introduce a third party for verification?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Like say if you were to, I don't know, hire out a third party contractor to manage your security, the only way you could get in is say like you had your code or your key, they had a key to help you out. I guess maybe a third key from like your boss or something.
But if you think about it, banks are already doing something similar based on your location. So if they look for patterns in your location, your spending patterns, and if you're using your debit card, for example, and you go to a cash machine, and then
Christian's being funny.
20 seconds later, 20 seconds later, you go back use your credit card in India, they know something's wrong, unless you were in India when you started. Because I've had that a couple of times of going on holiday, and the first time I go to use my card, I get a phone call from the bank saying, "Is that really you?" You know.
Yeah. There's also stuff like travel notices in various bank apps.
Yeah. Although if they were really being clever about it, the fact that I was in the airport buying a coffee might have given them a clue.
Yeah. No. Sounds like there's a lot you can do here. I guess it's a pretty wicked maze for a hacker to get to your data as it stands even now.
I think one more thing is that to be safe on internet is to use your own trusted device or somebody whom you trust, really trust. This is I always, whenever I do sessions for children's, I always first talk about digital footprints and how to stay safe online. And it may be matter of time, accidentally you access from some cyber cafes. In India, you have cafes, cyber cafes where you go and you sit over there and you log in your machine. So you don't know, you can't trust that device. So you have to be very careful. It doesn't matter if it's your mobile, but do it from your system because you trust it, and do it from a trusted network.
Absolutely right. And if you're doing anything like accessing your bank account, the safest way of doing that is using your phone as a hotspot. So you're going through your own trusted device rather than going through someone's free Wi-Fi.
Perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, not to mention, and like y'all talk about all the digital options, but then you have social engineering too.
Mm-hmm.
That alone will never go away as long as people are able to be manipulated into giving up stuff to hackers.
Like you say, that's never going to go away, is it? Yeah.
That's what a lot of like these phishing and vishing and all that other phishing training is online for. Last I heard, I think there's another one called spear phishing where they go after like a wide range instead of just a targeted campaign. Maybe that's what the original Nigerian prince one was supposed to be.
I'm still waiting on him getting back to me.
Yeah, me too.
I paid him twice in case the first lot didn't go through. Still not got back to me. I don't know why.
Dang it. I was even going to drive a box of cash down to the mailbox. You can't get more secure than that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And one more thing, is that if you find something, it's very important that we report. One thing which has been missing, is like if you are getting some emails which are like those phishing emails or junk spam, those are like going to have an attack, then it's our responsibility that we make sure that we put them as an report to the Google or report it to Microsoft. That's very important so that it can't be hurted to somebody else. And also take a step back whenever you receive any kind of an email saying that your Apple ID has been resetted or your PayPal has received like $5 or you win a lottery. Just take a step back and think, see the links, see the first thing is you check your email address, the email address from where you have received. Then you go better you go to the site directly and log in rather than clicking the link. I was about to get spam, with this attack, and I was having a link received from PayPal, and I was not much a user of a PayPal, but I just got that link and I just clicked the link and it asked me to enter the password. Now Apple was having a keychain, so when I landed to that page, the keychain was not getting activated. And I was surprised that why the keychain is not getting activated. Then I looked the hyperlink and I saw that it's PayBal, BAL. So that helped me to, I was just about to get, hacked, but luckily, with that feature by Apple, saved me.
Yeah, that's one of the first things they say is if you suspect an email, don't click any links inside that email at all.
I actually have a funny story for that if y'all want to hear it. Kind of
No.
ties in what he was talking about. So a while back, I was trying to sell my couch, right? So have any of y'all ever used the app Let Go? Is that global? Or
Never heard of it.
No.
Never.
okay. Think of like a watered down version of Facebook Marketplace. I'm sure you've probably used that before.
No.
No. Think of a place you can sell stuff.
Oh, this is stuff you making up.
eBay,
So,
screw
yes.
that.
You're just looking forward to going to the dentist now, aren't you?
But anyway, I was trying to sell a couch on there, right? And like I had a bunch of offers show up within like 5 minutes. And this wasn't even a nice couch. It's just like a, your standard run of the mill, maybe worth a couple $100 couch. It's not like, the Taj Mahal of couches or something. Right? So pretty much I was responding to this one guy for like a day or two. And he just kept saying, okay, we're going to give you this money. And it was like $1,000-something, like way more. So that was already a red flag. So I was like, I don't know about this. And he's like, come on, man, we can make this happen. And he like sent me a check and I had to like print it out and sign it. And I was actually about to deposit it until like I figured out, I should probably look at the firm that this is from. So in the States, I'm sure the European countries and everybody else has a counterpart to this. There's the Better Business Bureau. And I use that to look up like this firm they're claiming to be from. It's like some law firm or something up in New York. I was like, why is someone in New York trying to buy a couch in Alabama? Just something about that doesn't seem quite right. So bada bing, bada boom. I started calling him out on it. He's like, come on, man, we can do this. I'm just like, yeah, I don't remember ever calling you my friend, because he was like kind of slipping that in there too, like some loaded language, right? So, after that, I was like, well, I'm going to call your firm and find out what's going on here. And I call up there, disconnected number. So I was like, I don't think I'm going to do this. And he's like, trying one last time. Yes, you will have this money and then you can pay the workers who come to move your couch, which was another thing I didn't know about until then. I was just like, why am I going to pay your guys to take my couch? So anyway, it just turned out I did deposit it, but I froze the transaction and the check bounced. So that's apparently one of the scams they use, just for a real life example. More of the story, never try to sell a couch.
Were you selling it or giving it away?
Man, I ain't gonna give away a run-of-the-mill couch. I'm too cheap for that. But I did give it a pretty good discount.
All right, Claudia. All right, see you later.
Bye-bye. See you later.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
How long ago was that, Brendan?
Probably it was last year sometime. I think last October, somewhere around that. I got any stories where you've been taken for a run?
I don't think so. Remember, I get lots of emails, like Faraz was saying, from like pretending to be PayPal and stuff like that. But yeah, then I just go and, like Faraz and Oakley said, I never click the link. I just go and log into PayPal to see what's going on.
Yeah. Like I know this thing between like hackers and corporations has been kind of something that's been going on for a long time. I wonder if the corporations will ever tweak their security so well that the hackers can't get into it, albeit like through social engineering.
That's not possible.
So you don't think there's ever going to be security strong enough to withstand pretty much any cyber attack?
No, there's no such thing. That would be like saying, let's make a door that's got so many locks on it, no one can ever get through it. They'll just come through the window.
Yeah.
Anyone who thinks that by, you can make something completely secure, they're just fooling themselves.
I wasn't really thinking it would be possible, but it's kind of nice to dream of, I guess.
Nice to dream.
Yeah, it was actually going to be the other way around, because if you might be able to make something with, 128-bit encryption on it that's really, really effectively 100% secure at the moment. But in 5 years' time, someone's home PC will be able to decrypt that in 10 minutes. So the speed of processing power is increasing so fast that what's secure today is definitely not going to be secure tomorrow. All you've got to make sure is that the data you're storing on that supposedly secure device is time sensitive, so that in 5 years' time, it'll be relevant if they get it or not.
I wonder if you can also build in safeguards to sanitize the data before it actually got hacked. Like if there's a way for you to notice it's being hacked to execute that. I mean, I don't know. I've never thought about that before.
You can, but one thing to look at is who are most of the hackers? Most of the hackers are people who are very IT competent. They're the same people who are building the protection. And if you've got somebody in your organization who's responsible for building all of your protection and you piss them off and they leave, how safe is your protection? Because they're going to be the hacker and they know the system inside out.
I'm sure they probably left a back door somewhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, that's why they have the whole like white versus gray versus black hackers, isn't it? Like whites for corporations, gray test things, and black hackers are like bad actors.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things. I mean, it's really interesting and really useful for red teaming and penetration testing and things like that. And a lot of the time, people put these huge, secure systems on the devices and they spend all their money on putting the protection on the device. And then they put a $20 lock on the door. And you can basically just open the door with a very simple device and then plug your cable into the server room and take out the data directly. So there's lots of ways in. Penetration testing is a fun job.
Have y'all ever done that before? Sounds cool.
I wouldn't say if I had.
Okay. So that means yes.
If you're talking about security point of view, safety, one thing also which I would like to share here, the one thing is that shoulder surfing, which is very common, like if you are putting your pen, it's somebody will just see the pen on your mobile and just try to, use the screen protectors which are having the privacy.
Yeah.
So from the sideways, the person can't see.
Can't see it.
Yeah. So.
And there's a lot of devices that now, secure entry devices and secure PIN devices, they actually randomize the position of the digits. So you can't just type in a pattern knowing where the digits are. And the reason is because if somebody watches the pattern, or even if they look at your screen, they'll see where your finger has touched multiple times. And so if it comes up in a random order, you have to know the numbers in order to put them in the right order.
By the way, the kids are very fast in learning that patterns.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they communicate with each other really well in universities as well, because universities are notorious for shutting down access to certain sites because it uses up all their bandwidth and because people are streaming files and doing all sorts of stuff like that. And so they block it. And as fast as they come up with ways of blocking it, the kids are finding solutions by using, remote access and things like that to get around it. And so actually the best hackers who come into your organization, or the best ways of getting around things, are probably the people who just left university, who've just arrived in your organization.
Because they're caught up on the most cutting edge stuff.
I'm just laughing at the bank heists going on in the chat. Exactly the same thing happened near where we used to have our office in Camberley. And they built knocked down a pub and they built a brand new co-op on the corner. And the co-op hadn't even opened, but they had filled the cash machine. And somebody just did a ram raid on it. They stole a truck and drove the truck into it and then drove off with the cash machine. And so this brand new store that had never even opened didn't open for another month. Yeah.
But can they do anything? Like, how hard is it to get into the cash machine? And is there anything set up to where maybe the machine will spray the money somehow?
Yeah, they do all that stuff. They have ink, They have dyes, they have everything in there. But you've got to think of the downsides, because if the dye bomb goes off accidentally and you've got 100 grand in the machine, that's an expensive loss. You can't use that money anymore. It's a balance between the two, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the same with can you get into it? The machines are designed to delay people getting into it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
if you've got a big enough grinder, you can get into anything.
Wouldn't it just be as easy as cutting off the power supply, or does it have a dedicated one
No,
usually?
no. It's much more complex. There's lots of physical security in there as well as electronic.
Oh, so I was just thinking you cut off the power and it won't do any of the other stuff. Way too simple, apparently.
No. Yeah. And most of them fail safe if the power supply goes off. So they'll lock when the power goes off.
I was thinking a secondary built-in power supply, but
Well, some of the electronic safes, they actually have there's a couple, well, they're not normally obvious, but there's a couple of pins on the outside. And if you put one of those 9-volt batteries across those pins, if the internal battery or power supply has gone flat, you can boost it with that to actually type in the code and open them.
wow.
Oakley knows a lot.
Oakley.
Oakley, what did you do in your past?
I think we need to, Oakley, these ideas need to be given for the new movie MI8.
Right.
Yeah. I was in the army for a long time.
Yeah, so maybe, maybe if I'm directing some Indian movie, maybe we can.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah. We get
I
Amitabh
have a
Bachchan.
proposal.
Yeah.
How about an
I got
Indian
that,
version of
Faraz.
James
I
Bond?
got it.
I can be George Bond.
George Bond. No, I'm gonna team up with Amitabh Bachchan. Me
Yeah.
and him together. Yeah.
Hey, you got an easy tie-in for your name to link you to Honest Abe too, Oak.
Yeah. Did I tell you I used to be an actor?
Instead of chopping down that cherry tree, there's an oak tree over there.
Yeah. Let me just.
That looks like an oak tree in your mouth.
This thing here. Oh no.
No.
How can you say
Ours
that?
Others.
I've been
What are you
grown.
talking about, Dick Moffat?
Exactly.
I'm just
Yeah.
sad I can't smoke cigars. I would if I could, but I'm not able.
You're not able.
What kind of
You don't.
cigar is that anyway?
It just overcomes me. That's all.
This has got a Connecticut broadleaf wrapper. It's a quick draw from. Yeah.
Nice.
Quick draw.
As you heard from Apache Indian Musics, which I shared you.
Mm-hmm.
You like those?
Oh yes, very much, very much. I'll add it to my playlist. Yeah,
I'm sharing some Indian music to Oz these days.
yeah, yeah. Getting my Indian pop culture together. Yeah.
Oh, Faraz, you should pop one of those in the chat. Don't hold out on us now.
Oh. Let's see.
You remember the Bulgaria, the shop, which was having